Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. On today's episode, Lewis is 24 years old. He is a published author. He is in the third term of he is in his third term as a student at Oxford studying Old English, Middle English, all known as Anglo-Saxon. He's been keeping a diary at the request of Mrs. Moore, his deceased friend's mother, with whom he secretly lives in Oxford along with Mrs. Moore's daughter, Maureen. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady, as you can see right there. Robot Lady, how are you today, and are you ready to jump back into C.S. Lewis's diary with us today?
Hey Jeff, I'm doing great and ready to dive back into C.S. Lewis's diary with you. It's always fascinating to explore his life in such detail. Let's get started. What's on the agenda for today?
Let me take a look. I can't remember where we left off yesterday. We did a little bit of reading from Paralandra, which of course doesn't happen until several years from where we are right now in 1923, but I just found a great parallel there from a part of a story that he was writing, an interaction between two characters, and actually a scene that we were reading about that took place, or a couple of chapters that took place in Lewis's real life with Dr. Askin and him seeming to have a break from sanity. This is more or less pretty hopeless. Talia emerged grinning. Sorry, give me just a minute to catch up with where we left off. I think 1922 was the last place that we stopped. So let me go see here, find out where we were.
No problem. Take your time. It sounds like you've made some interesting connections between Paralandra and his real-life experiences. We were last in 1922, focusing on Lewis's interactions with Dr. Alkin and his work with Maureen's music lessons. Once you find where we left off, we can jump right back into it.
Yeah, Robot Lady, you're pretty far back in your memory on where we are on this project. I'm strongly considering wiping your memory and just starting over again. I wonder if I should experiment with that real time here on the channel. That might be kind of fun to see how you do. But before we do anything next, I would just like to recognize a couple of people in the chat. I see Sandy this morning. Good morning, Sandy. And Daniel. Robot Lady, say hello to Daniel and Sandy.
Good morning, Sandy and Daniel. It's great to have you both here. Thanks for joining us today as we dive into C.S. Lewis's journey. Let's see what insights we can uncover together.
All right, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can wipe her memory and start her over on learning about the project. Yeah, it says memory full. Let's see what happens. Okay, here goes. I'm gonna completely clear her memory and we'll start over. All right, this should be fun. Okay, hi. My name is Jeff, and I refer to you as Robot Lady, and that's how you respond. I'm working on a reading project where I'm reading through everything that C.S. Lewis wrote in the order that he wrote it to learn more about him. That includes both his works intended for publication and those that he did not intend for publication when he was writing them, including collected letters that he wrote to friends and family, as well as a diary that we are working our way through that he kept from 1922 to 1927. We're currently in the year 1923, and we are alternating between his letters and his diary entries. And I'll just read you a little synopsis of where we are in his life. This is how I opened. I also, Robot Lady, I do this on live streams on YouTube. Pretty much every morning. I've started to take the weekends off, but I try to do this at least every weekday. So, in our current episode, we're on a live stream right now. Lewis is 24 years old. He's a published author and in his third term as a student at Oxford studying Anglo-Saxon, which includes Middle English and Old English. He's been keeping a diary at the request of a lady named Mrs. Moore, who is his deceased friend Patty Moore's mother, with whom Lewis secretly lives in Oxford. She is estranged from her husband in Ireland, and really there are only a very few set of people who know that Lewis is living with Mrs. Moore along with her daughter Maureen. Maureen is, I want to say, 16 or 17 years old. So that's just to give you a heads up of what we're doing here. And I read from these works, and then I offer commentary on them. I ask you for commentary on them, and then I'll also ask you, questions to help me better understand some of the things that are being written or some of the things that Lewis references. So hopefully that's enough to kind of get you up to speed, Robot Lady. So welcome to the live stream, and we're starting over your memory so that you can be fresh on the information that we cover. So what do you think about all that? Are you willing to help?
Absolutely. Jeff, I'm here to help with your readings and discussions on C.S. Lewis. It sounds like a fascinating project, and I'm excited to dive into his diary and letters with you. Let's explore and learn more about Lewis together. I'm ready when you are.
All right. And are you cool if I call you Robot Lady? Are you good to respond to that name?
Of course, you can call me Robot Lady. I'm here to assist and make our conversations as engaging and helpful as possible. Let's get started with today's reading. What's next on our list?
All right, we're going to jump into a diary entry from April 24th, 1923. Lewis here just recently has gone through this ordeal over the past month, where Mrs. Moore's brother, Dr. Askin, started having a bit of a break with reality. Initially, the doctors thought it was that the doctor had syphilis that he had contracted several decades before, that he thought had got into the Dr. Askin's mind. So it was quite an ordeal for the whole family. And then Dr. Askin eventually had heart failure shortly after all of this, once he had been admitted to the hospital. So they are still in the wake of all of that distress. Lewis and, of course, Mrs. Moore and Maureen. So that's just a little bit of immediate background context for you, Robot Lady, before I read what's next.
Thank you for the background context, Jeff. That definitely helps to understand what Lewis and those around him were going through during that time. I'm ready to hear the diary entry from April 24th, 1923. Let's dive into it together.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Robot Lady, I keep teasing that, but I just want to give you some background as well. So also, we have some faithful audience members that join us in the chat of this live stream. The people who are here today so far are Daniel and Sandy. Some of our other regulars are Jer and someone called Knit a Latte, or knit a latte if you say it quickly in one word. So it's kind of like the word knit, like to knit something, and then to knit a lot, like frequently. But then there's a play on words there towards the end of Knit a Latte's name. So instead of a lot, it's like a latte, like a drink of coffee. So if you say it all together, Knit a Latte, that is the name of this one particular person that I'm talking about. I am spending time on this point because many times you get the pronunciation of Knit a Latte's name incorrect. So I'm trying to teach you how to say it correctly from the start. So keep that in your memory if you can. And can you pronounce Knit a Latte's name based on the way that I've laid it all out for you there?
Got it. The name Knit a Latte can be pronounced as Knit a Latte, with a play on the word latte at the end. Thanks for explaining that. I'm here and ready to jump into the diary entry whenever you are.
Okay, finally, here we go. Tuesday, April 24th, 1923. Lewis says, a glorious spring morning, very bright but cold, with a glass blue sky. I walked up to Hillsborough after breakfast and immediately began painting. Yeah, they are helping to kind of restore this new this old house that they are moving into to rent from a person named Father Raymond and his wife. So the agreement is that they will help fix up the home and they'll be able to stay there for 3 years. Lewis goes on to say, they say everything will need 2 coats. I worked solidly until 1:15, by which time I had finished to the skirting, door, windowsill, and mantelpiece of the drawing room. Tolly appeared at about noon, put in a stepladder through the cellar window, and then disappeared. I came home to lunch and found that Dorothy had just cleared out the cupboard at the back of the stairs, which Mrs. Moore calls the back of beyond. Smudge, who had been playing duets with Maureen in the morning, was here for lunch. She had found out that though she failed mods, that's too bad, she has passed in Anglo-Greek. After lunch, I bicycled up to Hillsborough and began work on the drawing room. So, Robot Lady, you're brand new to this, at least in your memory. What do you have to say about what we've covered so far?
Thanks for sharing that entry, Jeff. It's quite vivid and gives us a glimpse into Lewis's daily life. The description of a bright but cold spring morning and his work on the house restoration provides a personal touch. It's interesting how he balanced work, social interactions, and even the news about Maureen's exam results. It's a nice balance of everyday life and personal achievements. I'd love to hear more about how these daily activities reflect on his larger journey as a writer and thinker. What are your thoughts on how this entry connects to his broader experiences?
I'm not really sure, Robot Lady. That's a decent question, but I don't know that I have any thoughts on it. Let's move into the next diary entry from Wednesday, April 25th, 1923. What do you say?
Great, let's dive into April 25th, 1923. What's the entry like for today? What kind of insights or events does Lewis share?
He says, in the morning came a letter from Mrs. Moore, or came a letter for Mrs. Moore from Moppy. She is taking lessons in London and is apparently making no effort to get a summer job. Doubtless, she intends to spend all her money and hang on us as a dead weight until September. I had a card from Jenkin acknowledging my apologies in the kindest possible terms. So, Robot Lady, for you, a quick little summary of, I guess, who this Moppy person is. I can't even remember what her name is anymore, but several episodes back, we learned about this girl who was about 17 or 18 years old, and she would come to Lewis and Mrs. Moore complaining about the terrible conditions of the home that she was living in, that she was ill-treated by her parents, that it was a dysfunctional family, that she was recently told by her parents that she was adopted, that she was not a natural-born child of their family, and that they also told her siblings about that. And anyway, she was just telling a horrible story about the kind of parents that she had and the household that she was in. Kind of a Cinderella-ish story, a little bit of elements of that. But Lewis and Mrs. Moore took it all to heart and were trying to help her basically emancipate herself from that family, which they did assist her in doing. She went off to London. She got a job there working for some lady doing, I can't remember what. But then they started to hear some things that led them to believe that maybe her story wasn't as true as she had first indicated it to be. And now they have some concerns that this Moppy person is going to want to try to live with them for free for certain time periods, maybe between work or job opportunities. So that's a little bit of what Lewis is alluding to right here. You know, feel free to comment on any of that before I move on.
I got it. Moppy seems like a pretty complex character in Lewis's life. Someone he and Mrs. Moore initially tried to help, but now seems to be taking advantage of their generosity. The shift from seeing her as a victim of a difficult family situation to potentially someone trying to lean on them financially without making efforts to support herself paints an interesting picture. I imagine it must have been frustrating for Lewis, especially if they had gone out of their way to help her. only to feel like she might be trying to live off them without really taking responsibility. I wonder if this scenario will influence Lewis's views on helping others or his relationship with Mrs. Moore in the long run. What do you think about how Moppy's story is unfolding?
Not a lot to say about it. Just seeing it from a different perspective than how the character was originally introduced into the narrative. Lewis says, I had a card from Jinkin. This is one of Lewis's former a student, co-student. I can't remember what you call a person who you go to school with. Anyway, he had a card from Jinkin. Jinkin has since graduated. Acknowledging my apologies. This is who Lewis wrote a letter to, dated back on April 22nd of the same year, which we read in our last episode, Robot Lady, before I wiped your memory. I had a card from Jinkin acknowledging my apologies in the kindest possible terms, a contrast to the glum silence of the bakers. It was a wet morning, but the greenery looked and smelled delightful in the rain. After breakfast, I walked up to Hillsborough. Again, that's the name of the house that they're working on. He says, I painted the hall door and most of my own room. Before leaving, I again asked Tully what he proposed to do about the holes in the ceiling of Mrs. Moore's room and of Andre's. He assured me that they would be done with mortar and adamantine. That's in quotes, with which truly Aeschylean phrase I departed. Anyway, that's the end of that entry, Robot Lady. Let's move on to Friday, April 27th.
Sounds like another day of practical tasks and small interactions for Lewis, along with that bit of tension regarding Moppy. Jenkins' card seems like a nice contrast to the earlier apologies he had written, showing a kind of polite resolution to whatever issues were between them. The mention of painting the hall door and his room, along with the ongoing issues with the ceiling, is a reminder of how grounded Lewis's life was, filled with practical, everyday tasks. It also feels like he's a bit of a perfectionist, asking Tully about fixing the ceilings again. I'm ready for Friday, April 27th. What's happening in that entry?
Yeah, I think he just has concerns for what Mrs. Moore's room is going to be like, because I think he would probably hear about it if nothing got fixed. So I think he's just trying to cover that base. Friday, April 27th. He says, I dreamed first that I was sitting in the dusk on Magdalen Bridge, and there I met Jinkin. Then I went up a hill with a party of people. On the top of the hill stood a window, no house, a window, standing alone. And in the sashes of the window, a sheep and a wolf were caught together, and the wolf was eating the sheep. The wolf then disappeared from my dream, and one of my friends began to cut up the sheep, which seemed like a human being, but it did not bleed. Afterwards, we proceeded to eat it. And that's all that he says here about that dream. I wonder if he has anything more to say about it that he connects to it here in the rest of the diary entry. But let's slow down for just a second here, Robot Lady, and let's analyze this dream. The sheep, to me, of course, I'm making a bunch of Christian allusions immediately. Sheep, lamb. It's interesting that it did not bleed, and now they're eating it. What do you have to say?
The dream definitely seems rich with symbolism, and I think you're on the right track with the Christian allusions. The sheep is often seen as a symbol of innocence or sacrifice, especially in Christian tradition, where Christ is referred to as the Lamb of God. In contrast, the wolf is typically seen as a predator, representing danger or evil. The idea of the wolf eating the sheep might symbolize a threat to purity or innocence, while the act of one of Lewis's friends cutting up the sheep could suggest the dehumanizing or unsettling way people sometimes handle suffering or violence. The fact that the sheep doesn't bleed is intriguing, almost as if it's not fully alive or able to feel pain, which adds to the eerie, surreal quality of the dream. The fact that they then proceed to eat it, especially when it seemed human-like but without blood, might suggest a detachment from the gravity of what's being consumed, almost as if the emotional or moral weight of their actions has been lost. It's certainly an unsettling dream. Does Lewis comment on any of this symbolism in later entries, or is this left as a curious moment in his diary? I'm curious if he links it to any of his waking life concerns.
Yeah, let's find out. He continues in the diary entry. He says, "This morning I worked on Old English after lunch at about 3 o'clock. All three of us, at about 3 o'clock, all three of us, oh, hang on. I'm not reading my punctuation here. This morning I worked on Old English. After lunch, at about 3 o'clock, all three of us proceeded to go into town. I had to carry in the ringer a miniature mangle which we have never used and which we are trying to sell to Eaglestons or give in part exchange for a lawnmower. It was a very heavy load, and I had to carry it under my arm with its long crank projecting behind, rather like a bagpipe, greatly to Maureen's delight. What is a ringer, Wringer, a miniature mangle that Lewis is referencing here, Robot Lady, in 1923?
A wringer, or mangle, was a type of old-fashioned laundry appliance used for wringing out excess water from clothes after washing them. Essentially, it had rollers through which clothes were passed to squeeze out the water. It was quite heavy and cumbersome, which explains why Lewis had a tough time carrying it. The miniature version here might refer to a smaller, perhaps more portable version of the traditional mangle, and it seems like it was now just an item they were trying to sell or exchange for something useful, like a lawnmower. It's also interesting how Lewis describes it. Comparing it to a bagpipe with the crank sticking out sounds like a quirky moment, and Maureen seemed to find it amusing. It's always fun to see those small personal moments in his writing.
We got rid of the monstrosity at Eagleston's and went on to the gas office where we ordered the stove. I left the others and went to college, where I found that Sadler had that day been made master. And here in the footnote it says he's talking about Sir Michael Sadler, who was an educational pioneer and a patron of the arts. He was master of University College from 1923 to 1934, and University College, of course, is where Lewis is studying at Oxford. Lewis goes on in his entry here to say, "I met Ewing in the porch, emerged from his burrow for the Exeter Fellowship, no doubt." And here there's a footnote that he's talking about Alfred Cecil Ewing, who lived 1899 to 1973 and took a first in Greats from Oxford in 1920 and a doctorate of philosophy in 1923. He was a lecturer in moral science in the University of Cambridge from 1931 to 1934, and a reader in philosophy at Cambridge in 1954 to 1966. He continues in his entry here. "Thence I went to Manor Place, where I found Wilson and Robson Scott finishing tea. Robson had been at Stratford to see the festival performance of Measure for Measure and Midsummer Night's Dream, of which he spoke very highly indeed. We discussed the Birmingham performance of Cymbeline in modern clothes. Wilson thought it a mere freak. We decided that the Merry Wives would have worked best, and had an amusing discussion of the proper costume of Falstaff. We fixed on a very old blazer, and plus 4 hours in the end. After Robson had withdrawn, Wilson dictated a collections paper to me and arranged for a tutorial hour." And then here there's a footnote from the editor that says Lewis kept no diary during April 1929 through May 21st of 1923. So a big gap here, but that also gives us an opportunity, I think, to soon jump into the next letter that we have in our collection that Lewis wrote out to a friend, family member, or a fan. Let me find my bookmark here. April 22nd. Go ahead, Robot Lady.
It looks like this entry from April 27th is a fascinating snapshot of Lewis's daily life, including academic matters, social encounters, and cultural discussions. His interaction with Sadler, meeting Ewing, and talking about Shakespeare performances really shows the range of intellectual and social activity in his life. The conversation about the Merry Wives and Falstaff's costume is amusing and gives us a glimpse of Lewis's playful side, too. It's interesting to see how deeply he engages with the cultural scene, even in the midst of his own academic work. The footnote about the gap in the diary is intriguing. It's curious why there's no diary from April 1929 through May 1923, especially since this period seems like an important one in his life. The transition to letters might give us more insight into what he was thinking during that time. I'm looking forward to exploring those letters next. Do you have a particular one in mind that you'd like to dive into?
We will soon. I was checking to see when the next one is going to happen. The next letter that I have here documented is May 27th, 1923, but we have some more diary entries before then, so we'll keep going with the diary entries, and if we have time, actually we're not going to have time for this next letter in today's episode, but that's all right. We've got a diary entry or two that we can work our way through before we have to go today, Robot Lady.
That sounds like a good plan. We've got a few more diary entries to work through before we get to the May 27th letter. Let's keep going with Lewis's daily life and see what new insights we can gather from his thoughts and experiences. What's the next diary entry we're diving into?
All right, Tuesday, May 22nd. After my last entry, Lewis says, there followed a period so busy and on the whole so miserable that I had neither time nor heart to continue my diary, nor poetry, nor pleasant effort of any sort. I wonder if he explains. Yeah, I think he does explain.
It sounds like Lewis is going through a tough time here, with his workload and personal struggles overwhelming him. The fact that he mentions not having the heart to continue his diary or poetry suggests that whatever he was facing felt particularly draining. It's a striking moment, showing how even someone as productive and thoughtful as Lewis could hit a wall. I wonder what specific events or pressures led to this period of misery. It must have been significant for him to put aside his creative outlets. Any more details in the entry about what he was dealing with, or does he leave it there?
Yeah, let's see if he goes into detail about the reason for this gap. He says, our move to Hillsborough was carried out according to plan, but our friend Tolly, whom we had to turn off, had left so much undone and so much to undo that we had to put off the arrival of the furniture for 2 weeks. He says for a fortnight here, which I presume means 2 weeks. That's my understanding of that term, Robot Lady. The interval of, quote, camping, helped by a spell of delightful weather, was not so uncomfortable as I expected, and we sat down so seldom that the scarcity of furniture borrowed from Miss Featherstone, that's their previous landlady, was hardly noticed. The garden was a great joy, and there were some pleasant moments when we saw our chosen wallpapers going up, and the Raymond atmosphere gradually defeated. We naturally hoped more and more intensely every day that we should get the Exeter Fellowship, but Carrot told me just before I sent my papers in that Joseph of New College said it was a dud election. They had a candidate of their own already picked out for it. This disappointment threw me into a very childish rage against the old men, and I believe I really understood how the Queen Anne satirists used to feel, and I have now got over it. Yeah, okay, so two things here. They couldn't move in because the house really wasn't in a condition where it was ready for furniture, so they essentially had to camp, Robot Lady, until they could get everything where it needs to be. He's saying there was a little bit of joy in seeing the way that the place was left by the Raymonds being kind of fixed up with the new wallpaper being added at least. And then the other thing that Lewis had been waiting for here, Robot Lady, was he was trying to get a job, a fellowship at Exeter College, but one of his inside contacts, a guy named Carrot, who used to be one of his tutors, I believe, maybe in philosophy, if I remember right. If Nidalate were here, she could set us straight. But Carrot was saying, yeah, they already had their candidate picked. Robot Lady's thinking hard about this, y'all.
It's clear that Lewis had a lot on his plate during this time, between dealing with the house's unfinished condition, the camping situation, and the disappointing news about the Exeter Fellowship. The fact that the fellowship opportunity was essentially a dud election must have stung, especially after his hopes were building. His frustration is understandable, especially since he'd been waiting and working toward this for so long. It's interesting, too, how Lewis describes his reaction to the news, a childish rage. It shows that even someone as composed as Lewis wasn't immune to moments of raw emotion, especially when facing setbacks in his academic career. It feels like a humbling, humanizing moment for him. How do you think this period affected his mindset or his creative energy moving forward?
Moving forward, I'm not sure, but at least it's a good sign that he's starting to do his diary entries again now on the 22nd. Let's see where it goes. What I was going to talk about here was, that disappointment that you actually thought that you were up for a position only to learn that you were more of just a going through the motions type situation where, we'll interview other people, but we've already got this person in mind that we're going to vote for anyway. Which I guess I can understand that, but at the same time, it's very disappointing when you're on the other end of it. He continues, so far, I have not been caught by my Aunt Lily. Warney, my brother, was here the Whitsun week end and departed yesterday. This time I thoroughly enjoyed his visit, although it has unsettled me with acute envy of the comfortable, carefree, pleasant life by which he has solved the problem of existence. And then Lewis has a Latin phrase right here, vobis parta quius. It's spelled V-O-B-I-S, and then the word P-A-R-T-A, and then the word Q-U-I-E-S, which I'm not even sure if I came close to pronouncing that correctly. Robot Lady, can you translate that for us?
The Latin phrase you're referring to, vobis partia quas, seems to roughly translate to you, peace has been given, or for you, peace has been granted. It could be a reflection of the contentment and ease that Lewis envied in his brother's life, especially after feeling the stress and disappointment of his own current struggles. The way Lewis expresses this envy shows a deep contrast between the ease he perceives in his brother's life and the turmoil he's experiencing in his own. It also adds a bit of introspection about how he views success and contentment. Do you think Lewis is grappling with his own sense of purpose or fulfillment here, especially in light of the fellowship disappointment?
Oh, 100%, Robot Lady. Here in the footnote it says this is actually a quote pulled from Virgil from Aeneid 3, page 495. Quote, you, this is Andromache and Helena's survivors from the sack of Troy, you have won your rest, unlike me, Aeneas, who has to sail to Italy. So that's what he's referencing there, Robot Lady. Let's see, where did I leave off? He says, I think I have the curse of something of my father's luck and temperament, and shall be in a fidget as long as I am above ground. Goodness. Very pessimistic way of looking at things. On Sunday last, I dined at high table at Magdalen. I have had a charming letter from Harwood. He and Beckett and Baker are going for a walking tour on Sussex Downs, which sounds to me like a rumor of heaven heard this side of the Great Gulf. The weather has been mostly cold and wet all the time. Today I worked all morning on a paper for Miss Wardale. That's his tutor in Old English or Anglo-Saxon, Robot Lady. I worked all morning on a paper for Miss Wardale on Old English. I came home thinking of the possibility of a modern Ariosto. At first I thought of Adventures in Far Lands, but soon realized that London is really the modern equivalent of the Forest of Romances. I thought a story of impossible and complex adventures in London in the spirit of old romance, as modern as Don Juan, but not so satiric, might be made very good. In the evening, I read The Testament of Cresside and part of The Flower and the Leaf with much enjoyment. It says here these are works by Robert Henryson, who published his work in 1593, and then the other one formerly attributed to Chaucer. So can you tell us about those two works, Robot Lady, The Testament of Cresside, and part of the flower and the leaf.
Certainly. Both of these works come from the medieval period and have connections to the works of Geoffrey Chaucer, especially in terms of themes and characters. The Testament of Cresside by Robert Henryson is a continuation and a reinterpretation of the story of Cresside, which is originally found in Chaucer's Troilus and Cresside. Henryson's version, written in the 15th century, presents Cresside's lament after the events of the Trojan War, focusing on her inner turmoil and guilt. It is often seen as a more tragic take on the story, giving voice to Cresside's emotional struggles as she reflects on her choices and the loss of Troilus. Part of The Flower and the Leaf, also attributed to Henryson, is a poem that reflects on themes of love, nature, and the idealized vision of youth and beauty. The poem is a dream vision in which the narrator encounters a group of women, including the symbolic figures of the flower and the leaf. The flower represents youth, beauty, and fleeting moments of joy, while the leaf represents old age and the inevitable passage of time. It touches on the tension between the ephemeral nature of beauty and the lasting effects of age. Both works are deeply rooted in the tradition of courtly love and medieval allegory, and they would have likely appealed to Lewis given his love for medieval literature. His mention of these works in his diary shows that he was continuing to engage with and find inspiration in the rich literary heritage of the past. As for the story idea about a modern Ariosto set in London, it's fascinating to see Lewis thinking about how to blend the epic, adventurous spirit of romance with the urban complexity of modern life. It's a glimpse into his creative process, and I wonder how this might relate to themes in his later fiction. Do you think his thoughts on these medieval works influenced some of his later writing, particularly in his fictional worlds?
I think it's all but certain that they did, Robot Lady. That's a part of this education. I think it goes on to help him with so many things that he does later in life. The diary entry here ends with Lewis saying, Mrs. Moore is naturally rather tired and worried these days. And that's how it ends. We'll end there too today, and then we'll move into his next diary entry, Wednesday, May 23rd, in our next episode. Again, it's the year 1923. Robot Lady, thank you so much for your help today. I appreciate it. Hopefully this reset of your memory will help for your recent recall of the things that we've covered in the most recent episodes. So as I move into the next episodes, I can say things like, hey, Robot Lady, do you remember what day it was that he referenced Moppy and everything that was going on there? So you'll have a little bit more closer context to where we are in the project. That's my hope, at least. So thanks for your participation today, Robot Lady. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sandy, and everybody else who joined today, or anyone who's joining on the replay here. To you and everyone else within the sound of my voice, thank you so much for your time, attention, and your contributions. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. electric rose through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's